Okay, before we get started with the demo on how to mask, we're going to go over a few of the tools you're going to need and some different types of masking fluid. So, what is exactly in masking fluid? Well, masking fluid is a latex rubber suspended in ammonia. That's it. And when you open up the bottle of masking fluid, you're going to get a strong ammonia smell, and that's good. If you don't smell ammonia in your masking fluid, that means it's getting old and you want to throw it out and start with some fresh masking fluid. This particular brand right here is Winsor & Newton's Art Masking Fluid. It's got a little bit of color in it so that you can see it when it dries on the paper. This is Incredible White Mask Liquid Frisket. It's by the Graphics Corporation, and it dries clear. There's no color in it. And this is a fine line masking fluid pen, so it will draw out very fine lines and dots. And it is actually tinted blue so that when it dries, it's kind of a translucent blue color so you can see where it is on your watercolor paper. Now, before you open your bottle of masking fluid, if you do have the masking fluid that has color in it, you want to make sure that you roll it around to distribute the color. Don't shake it, because if you shake it, you're going to cause bubbles. And then when you go to dip your brush in your masking fluid and then apply it to your paper, you're going to have little tiny bubbles. And as the masking fluid dries, you're going to get little pinholes that paint can then seep down into. So you want to avoid making your masking fluid all frothy and getting a lot of bubbles in it. Just very gently roll it around. Same with your fine line. Just roll it around and that'll be good enough to distribute the color. I also keep this little plastic container for taking my masking fluid out of my masking fluid bottle, and I put a little bit in there, just as much as I think I'm going to need to paint from. That way it doesn't dry out the masking fluid that's in the bottle. I also have this Crepe rubber pickup tool. And as soon as your masking fluid's dry and you're ready to pick it up, you just rub that along the edge and then you can grab the masking fluid and start pulling it up. And I'm going to show you how that works when we get to our masking demo. And I also keep a little bar of soap. That way I can take my brush and I can put it in the water, and then I can run it through the soap, and it stops the masking fluid from gumming up the hairs in your brush. And speaking of brushes, make sure you use an old brush. Don't use your good new brushes. You will quickly destroy them, because no matter how hard you try to keep the masking fluid from gumming up the hairs in your brush, it's going to happen, and your brush isn't going to last very long, and you're going to have to throw it out and get a new one. So keep your old brushes around just for that. I also like using a rubber oil acrylic paintbrush. They're rubber tipped, and you don't have to dip it in water or rub it around in the soap. As soon as you apply the masking fluid and then it starts to dry on the tip, you just pull it off and dip it into more masking fluid. I also like to keep this little embossing stylus around. It's meant for paper crafting, but it's great because it's got these little ball tips, and you can just dip it in your masking fluid and make little dots on your paper, or you can even draw out very fine lines. So these are some handy little tools to have. And then I keep, of course, my little container of water so that I can not only dip my brush when I'm beginning and put a little bit of soap in it, but I frequently rinse my brush so that that masking fluid doesn't start drying. So there you go. There's the supplies that we are going to need for our masking demo. I have a couple of different leaves here that I've drawn out, and I not only want to show you how to mask, but I want to show you the difference between careful masking and careless masking, and how it looks after you've painted over it and then removed the masking fluid. So I'm going to start with some careful masking and making sure, oops, let's go back Rinse our brush, put it in some soap, make sure it penetrates the hairs in the brush. Now I'm going to go ahead and dip it in my masking fluid. And when you're masking, you want to make sure that you go slow, stay to the inside of whatever the image is that you're masking. Make sure you have plenty of masking fluid on your brush. Watch for bubbles forming, and if you see a bubble forming, just go ahead and add a little drop of masking fluid on top of it, and that should clear it up. And just let the masking fluid flow from your brush. Just kind of have a real light touch. See, I can see an area right there and right there where it looked like it was going to form a bubble in a pinhole. So I'm just I have my brush kind of at an angle. Now I'm going to rinse it, and I'm going to rub it in the soap again, and now back into the masking fluid. Oh, see, I can see another little spot right there where it looked like a bubble was going to form. Just going to try to get up in that little area right there. There we go. It's sometimes very difficult to see where exactly your masking fluid is on the edge. So sometimes you have to take your paper and lift it up and kind of look at it in an angle and see how well you did with getting right up to the edge. So that's carefully masking. Now I'm gonna purposely be a little careless. Masking is it's such a boring thing that it's something you kind of just want to rush through. It's so fun, the thought about being able to get started painting, that you're just thinking to yourself, I just want to get this done and get on to painting. I've spent so much time preparing to paint, and sometimes it could take a couple hours to do some masking. So there we go. Now I'm going to rinse my brush again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that masking fluid up, and I'm going to grab my fine line masking fluid pen, and I'm going to make some veins in this leaf. So I'm going to do just the opposite on this. I'm going to paint those little veins with some of this masking fluid, and then I'm going to paint the leaf. We're going to see how it does with making these fine lines. You have to be really careful with this. You want to go slow. Don't squeeze hard. And let the masking fluid just kind of come out on its own in the bottle. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. So let me turn this around this way. So I'm almost like just dragging it along, barely squeezing the tube. See, I think I squeezed a little bit too hard on those parts right there. Okay, so now I'm going to squeeze just a little bit, make some dots, like if we had some stamens in a flower. Make some a little bit bigger. Okay, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this needle that's in the lid back into the masking fluid. If I can see that. There we go. And that'll help stop it from gumming that little tube up. Now I'm going to show you using the little stylus. I'm just going to just let it flow. You can see the dots that it makes if you just tap it on the paper. And you can also use both ends. Here's the smaller end. It's a good way to do a small circle without having to use a brush. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to dry this thoroughly. And you're going to be able to tell that it's dried because this is going to turn very translucent yellow. And those lines are going to have a faint translucent blue look. And before you start painting, you want to make sure that your masking fluid is completely dry. If it's not completely dry and you go to apply the paint, by the time everything is dry and you're ready to pull off the masking fluid, you will rip up parts of the paper and then your whole painting will be ruined. So let's let this dry and we'll come back. And then I'm going to paint some backgrounds around those leaves, and then I'm going to paint the leaf right here so we can see what that masking fluid looks like after I've put some greens in that leaf. Okay, I've painted a background behind both leaves and my little squiggly lines, and I've painted inside the leaf where I made the little lines with the fine line masking pen and the leaf. So now let's start taking off the masking fluid. So we'll start with this leaf. So you can see it made some pretty thin lines. Okay, so we've got it all off of there. Now let's come over, see how our little dots look. And that's pretty cool. That made some very thin lines right there with the little stylus embossing tool. So I think that little tool did a pretty good job there. Got all the masking fluid off. Oh, except for right there. Now let's try the leaves. So let's start with this one, the one where I did some careful masking. Let's see how we did. Not bad. I still can see where I should have used probably a smaller brush to get those points sharp. You can see what happens when the masking fluid, the minute you lift your brush up, it makes a little dot. So I could have masked that a little bit more carefully. Now let's try getting the masking fluid off on the leaf that I carelessly masked. So let's see what this looks like. And yay, it looks terrible. You can see what happened when I didn't pay attention to staying inside the lines and I just rushed through it. It just left a pretty awful looking leaf. So, and look, there's a little bit extra masking fluid up there. So we'll get it all off the paper. And there you have it, how to use masking fluid. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please check out my homepage and join me for more information-packed tutorials and full watercolor paintings from start to finish for beginner, intermediate, and advanced, all using my simplified method of painting with a limited palette. So join me and let's get painting.